Oh, the 70s and your wacky Godzilla toys. Released in 1978 by GLJ Toys, whose other big claim to fame was releasing a car wash, apparently, with a face that only a collector could love and a body like nuclear tree bark that would make Godzilla Earth jealous. This Godzilla looks like a cross between Kermit the Frog and the Son of Godzilla suit. But you know what? I find him to be goofily charming. Plus, I've always had a soft spot for bendy figures. GLJ marketing from the 70s said that you could bend this Godzilla into thousands of poses. Well, I think most kids probably tried 1,001 poses, because good luck finding one without the bendy wire poking through like Mothra busting out of an egg. But if you do find one in good condition, he looks great on a shelf and pairs well with other vintage figures from this unique and strange time in Godzilla toy history. Well, till next time, I'm your host Slick from the Echoes of Giant Monsters podcast. Katsumi Tezuka was a baseball player turned actor who often worked as Haruo Nakajima's assistant on a number of kaiju films in the 50s and 60s. Occasionally, Tezuka would pinch hit, get it, for Nakajima and don various kaiju suits, including Godzilla himself in select scenes. Nakajima described Tezuka as an awesome colleague who carried himself literally like a boss and looked like a yakuza, whatever that means. Today we're going to be focusing on his most prominent role, playing Anguirus in 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. Probably the most animalistic fight in the franchise, Tezuka plays Anguirus like a wild, vicious creature, often lunging at Godzilla from a squatting position and grappling with him over great distances, all while smashing through multiple set pieces while still continuing to brawl with Nakajima. Not bad for someone who was 17 years Nakajima's senior. In my opinion, Nakajima and Tezuka work together to deliver one of the most physical and underrated fights in the franchise. If you ask me, you might even say they hit a home run. Nailed it. Till next time, this is Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Created for a joint US and Japanese TV movie that fell apart, Varan is one of the most curious and jacked muscular oddities in Toho's history. Varan is primarily portrayed by Mr. Godzilla himself, the king of the suit actors Haruo Nakajima, with Katsumi Tezuka filling in for what is believed to only be the water scenes, which seems to be consistent with available set photos. Nakajima's portrayal of Varan almost feels like the blueprint for what would become his portrayal of Godzilla in 1964's Godzilla vs. The Thing. The lumbering walk with the elbows and hands up is very similar to 1964's iconic pose and presents Varan as an ominous threat. Nakajima's Varan comes off like a purposeful bulldozer when he's crawling. He's not accidentally hitting buildings as he goes about his way, he's seeking them out and occasionally kicking up on his back legs to give a swooping look around, a move that I feel like is a staple of Nakajima's when he's playing crawling kaiju. When he's hit with the initial explosion in the film's climax, Nakajima excellently conveys Varan's pain and rage that might even make you feel a little bit sorry for him. Too long didn't read version? Nakajima's portrayal is another unbelievable performance. See what I did there? Till next time, this is Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is right around the corner, so let's chill out and look at some figures, eh? Today I'll be looking at the Playmates Shimo figure, an overall nicely detailed and well-articulated figure that you can get for around $10. The Frosty Ferret has full rotation in her shoulders, neck, and tail, and her legs can move only up and down. I wish there was a ball joint or something in her wrist so that her standing poses wouldn't look so goofy. You could say the lack of wrist articulation really leaves me cold. Ahem. Shimo's spines are a cool translucent bluish purple that reminds me of an ice-cold Coors Light can, and her tail paint matches perfectly. There is minimal paint on the mouth and face, but what is there is well done. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty nice figure for $10, so don't get left out in the cold. Snag one of these if you can. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Rie Ota was announced for G-Fest this year, so I figured this is a good time to take a look at this very important suit actor. Ota holds the distinction of being the first woman to play a kaiju in the Godzilla franchise, and joins an elite but small group of women kaiju suit actors. Most famous for her role as Baragon in GMK, Ota has been doing various stunt work and suit work for stage shows and TV shows since the mid-90s, most notably as part of the vast Metal Hero series. Ota's energetic and underdog portrayal of Baragon, boosted by a viral behind-the-scenes clip of Ota roaring herself while filming GMK, has made Baragon and Ota a fan favorite in recent years. While Baragon didn't do so hot against Godzilla in GMK, it looks like Ota had a chance to get some revenge as she took a bite out of Godzilla when the GMK suit actors reunited a few years ago. Personally, I look forward to hearing more about Ota's career later this year at G-Fest, as information about her is criminally sparse. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Doom Island was a cancelled Trendmasters line after the Godzilla 98 line left retailers with more leftovers than a takeaway bag from Old Country Buffet. Long believed to be a mostly lost line, authentic figures recently were discovered in Taiwan in warehouses and, at least according to the seller that I purchased this Anguirus from, thrift stores. The Treadmaster's Anguirus design is already peak 90s awesomeness. Slap a bunch of armor and missiles on him and you get 90s extreme with a capital X. This figure is tall and has enough muscles to make every 90s Major League Baseball player jealous, and it can confirm that the missiles fire at a speed that's faster than Rodan can fly. My only critique of this overall striking figure is the small neck he has, but I imagine that was done to accommodate the armor. Personally, I like displaying him about half armored. The box itself is an interesting mix of packaging errors and a collection of figures that could have been. If you're asking yourself, Slick, why is such a rare figure not in the box? Well, it's because I took him out of the box to let him breathe. I'm a monster. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Dent Man. Just who is this enigmatic avenger of enamel? Is he a hero or a menace? Join me as we begin a multi-part journey into the mystery that is Dent Man. The mysterious fighter for fluoride appears to have first become active in late 2015. The first Dent Man suit, or the baby tooth suit if you will, while striking, lacked the plaque protection of the current suit. But for the last 9 years, Dent Man's prowess has only grown. His overall message has been basically, clean your teeth, or else. Is this threatening aura that of a noble hero imparting tough-toothed love, or does something sinister lurk behind those pearly porcelains? To be continued. This has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. As we continue this investigation into Dent Man, it's time to turn to his rival, the mysterious Mr. Mutons. First becoming active in late 2019, Dent Man would have you believe that Mutons is a cavity caused by criminal candy, a menace to all molars if you will. But is that really the case? Just who is the villain here? Muton spreads a message of positivity, imploring his followers to enjoy something sweet in life. This frequently brings him into conflict with Dent Man's rigid dental health code. Heck, he even assaulted Mutons on his birthday when Mutons just wanted a day of sugary sweets to himself. Though at times it appears they set aside their differences, probably because Dent Man needs him, not the other way around, questions still linger as to who the hero is here and who really is the villain. Can it really be the one who just wants you to enjoy something sweet? This investigation continues. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. The Crestwood House Godzilla book. This was my very first exposure to Godzilla in a book I took out repeatedly from my elementary school library. So much so they let me have it when I graduated, after some begging. Published in 1977 and written by Julian May under the pseudonym Ian Thorne, May had been in and out of the sci-fi writing game for about 20 years at this point and wrote many of the original Crestwood House books. The book itself covers the Showa era in broad strokes up until Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, with some references to Rodan, Mothra, and Varan, who is described as doing naughty deeds. The book has its fair share of inaccuracies, though, chief among them being the King Kong vs. Godzilla 2 endings myth, and the name Zilla for my boy Anguirus, who's also a fire-breathing armadillo apparently. But the book is a collection of great photos, including a behind-the-scenes drawing credited to May herself, and fun enough write-ups that would make any kid interested in Godzilla like it worked on me. So I'll leave you with my favorite line from the book. Movie monsters that make a lot of money never die, and Godzilla is a blockbuster. This week, IDW released a Godzilla 70th Anniversary comic with its collection of 9 very unique stories, and a whole bunch of cool variant covers to go along with it. Neat. Admittedly, newer Godzilla comics are a bit of a collecting black hole for me, but I figured I'd pick this one up and I'm glad I did. While each of the stories is largely told from a human perspective, Godzilla and company functioning more like a backdrop, each story is very unique in presentation and in tone, and some stories get very personal. Also, the varied collection of artists further ensures that there is something for everyone in this collection. Now, while I think every tale is good and unique, there were 2 stories that really stuck out to me. First was a Wild West stylized tale featuring Mothra that was a neat surprise and I enjoyed it quite a bit. But my favorite part of the book was revisiting Half-Century War, one of my favorite Godzilla stories ever. Here we get a side story set in that universe called the Half-Century War, and it just really stole the show for me. Overall, highly recommended. Till next time, this has been your pal Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. The original goth kid of the Ultraman franchise with the look that says it's Halloween all year round, today we're talking about my favorite Ultra Kaiju, Sebozu. He first appears in the Ultraman episode Monster Graveyard, which is one of my top Ultraman episodes, but one I struggle to rewatch often because it's such an emotional gut punch like the brave little toaster. In a nutshell, Sebozu falls to Earth from the Monster Graveyard, lost and confused, just wanting to get back home so he can chill and listen to his Typo Negative records. But the skeletal sad boy is harassed by humanity at every turn because we're a bunch of jerks, but Ultraman for once abandons his mantra of blow stuff up and feel bad later, and ultimately succeeds in getting Sebozu on the rocket that returns him back to the Monster Graveyard, where he happily treats the rocket like a new stuffed animal. Seriously, emotional rollercoaster stuff here. But as a side note, I do have a Subozu pencil holder that is based on him holding the rocket, and it's heartwarming as hell. Subozu's future live-action appearances are mostly cameo in nature, but that said, he does pop up in Ultrafight quite a bit, and Ultrafight is a whole video into itself. Produced by the Rie Ota Kaiju Club and directed by Ultraman alum Kiyotaka Taguchi, Kaiju Bugan is a hot spring kaiju and guardian deity who awakens when the local townsfolk become filled with sad and unhappy emotions. Bugan appears right away and is always present in this short 25-ish minute film, and it's up to the small human cast led by Takaya Iyagi and Kanoko Sudo to figure out how to repel the hot spring water-spewing Bugan. Now, I really enjoyed this film when I saw it at G-Fest this year. The tone of the film is lighthearted without turning to parody, and the underlying message is excellently conveyed by the two leads, and it's a touching one that we all could probably use these days, and will warm your soul like the relaxing hot spring. Now, Bugan's design is great. His look is a tribute to the macaques, chickens, and volcanoes that are local to the Oita prefecture where the development team resides. Now, as a townie myself, I respect the dedication to local references. Hopefully, post-G-Fest awareness will become high enough to warrant a wider release. As they say, your mileage may vary, but Kaiju Bugan gets a big thumbs up from me. In 1977, Wonderland Records launched the Vinylverse with the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters. And yes, I just made up the term Vinylverse, and we're going to forget that there's also a tape and a CD release of these stories. Featuring Herb Trimpe's famous art, the cover boasts two adventures, Godzilla vs. the Alien Invasion and Godzilla vs. the Amphibion. The stories evoke the vibe of the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, complete with super cartoony-sounding aliens, but primarily use Godzilla's 1954 roars. Now, if you don't overthink it too much, Vinylverse Godzilla acts fairly similar to his Monsterverse counterpart. He appears primarily in response to threats, and basically seeks to restore balance. Vinylverse Godzilla is said to be 400 feet tall and is the ancestor or relative of a T-Rex. So, I guess the Marvel Godzilla look works here. Now, are these stories any good? Well, it's basically Hanna-Barbera Monsterverse. Everyone could have some fun with that. And besides, Vinylverse Godzilla is said to be a friend to humanity, so give him a chance. Now that Viewmasterverse Godzilla, on the other hand. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. What a strange timeline we live in. Godzilla and Gamera have crossed over in battle line, Godzilla and Kong rule the box office, and Bandai is making Godzilla 98 figures in 2024. Well, sorta. So it's not Godzilla 98, but it's Zilla, who is the alternate version of Godzilla 98 that appeared in Final Wars, and he's now immortalized as a Godzilla store-exclusive Bandai movie monster series figure. So, how is it? Well, it's typical Bandai, which means you'll get some nice detail and some basic arm and leg articulation, but you'll get less paint than even the Taco Bell Happy Meal figures had back in 1998. Now, even though the detail is nice, it still feels a little flat though. It's almost like the figure's trying to capture the dated CGI that brought Zilla to life in Final Wars. So, is it worth it? Well, it's definitely a cool novelty, but you'll have to pay a bit more of a premium as it's a Godzilla store exclusive. But I'm happy to have it, and it looks nice on my Godzilla 98 Taco Bell shelf. But that's a video for another time. So till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Prior to its original theatrical release and then its wild US makeover, Varan originally started life as a made-for-TV movie under the working title Monster of the East, Varan. I would have gone with Varan's Unbelievable Power Hour or something like that, but that's just me. But anyway, this was a joint production between Toho and ABPT, which was a subdivision of ABC, who was also working on the Volcano Monsters. When this subdivision collapsed, Toho decided to make Varan a feature film, aspect ratio and lack of color film be damned. The plan for the TV version was for it to be 3 to 4 episodes and a basic story. And holy Shimo, is it basic. Varan shows up, smashes things on the island, flies away, smashes things at the airport, gets defeated by the good guys, see ya, good night. That aside, the TV restoration is a unique footnote in history. There are still a number of missing scenes that have the sound-only title card, which unsettles me for some strange reason, and gives this version a found footage vibe. For such an oddball movie to begin with, it's interesting to think that with this partial restoration, there are 3 distinct versions of Varan out there. 1956's Godzilla King of the Monsters is often shuffled into the dustbin of history after fans learn it's really just an extreme makeover of a superior movie. But today we're going to give it a little appreciation. In the before times, also known as the early 90s for me, this was the only version of Godzilla's first outing that was readily available. And thanks to TNT's Godzillathons, it was one of my first gateway movies into the larger Godzilla franchise. If you don't overthink it and ignore a few inconsistencies, King of the Monsters functions best as a complementary story to the 1954 classic. The highlight is Raymond Burr's strong performance as Steve Martin, who exists mostly in the background, watching a grander story of Godzilla's rise and Ogata, Emiko, and Serizawa's love triangle play out in front of him, but he also brings a sense of gravitas to the scenes he carries alone, especially the scenes where Martin reports on Godzilla's Tokyo rampage. Now, of course, the movie isn't perfect. The anti-nuclear message is diluted down, and the scenes of Burr mugging against a wall border on parody at times, but there is enough good here to perhaps compel a new fan to dig a little deeper into Godzilla's history, just like it did for me all those years ago. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla probably features one of the coolest and coldest Interpol agents ever put to film, the mysterious Nanbara. In my early fandom years, the cigarette-smoking, alien-busting, crackshot secret agent was an instant favorite of mine and a type of character that I'd really like to see more of in the Godzilla series. Played by Shin Kishida, Nanbara possesses a dangerous air about him and spends a good chunk of the movie shadowing our heroes under the guise of being a scandal-chasing reporter. But ultimately, the wisecracking and smooth-talking agent reveals himself to be one of the good guys, and young me breathed a sigh of relief. Kishida himself was no stranger to the genre. Initially known for his vampire roles, he also starred in and wrote for the Ultraman and Fireman franchises, designed the Ultra Kaiju Prisma, and had a recurring role in Taiyu Sentai Sun Vulcan at the time of his unfortunately early passing at age 43 in 1982. Though his time was short, his impact was certainly not. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Day 2 of G-Fest is underway, so let's recap. The crowds are strong again today, so you better pack a lunch if you want to get into that dealer's room. And speaking of lunch, most of the bars in the area are doing Godzilla-themed menus and drinks, and some even have their own AI art to promote the menus. LOL. So I checked out some movies today, and I was excited to see Kaiju Bugan. I'll probably do a short in this movie soon, but it was quite the fun romp, and it was kinda heartwarming, one could say. My favorite merch pickups of the day, a short-scale Bullmark Anguirus figure, and this wind-up Godzilla. Now, I'm a sucker for wind-up toys. I mean, look at him go. It's a new adventure every time you wind him up. I can do this for hours, I tell ya. Hours. Well, till tomorrow, or maybe Monday, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Day 2 of G-Fest is underway, so let's recap. The crowds are strong again today, so you better pack a lunch if you want to get into that dealer's room. And speaking of lunch, most of the bars in the area are doing Godzilla-themed menus and drinks, and some even have their own AI art to promote the menus. LOL. So I checked out some movies today, and I was excited to see Kaiju Bugan. I'll probably do a short in this movie soon, but it was quite the fun romp, and it was kinda heartwarming, one could say. My favorite merch pickups of the day, a short-scale Bullmark Anguirus figure, and this wind-up Godzilla. Now, I'm a sucker for wind-up toys. I mean, look at him go. It's a new adventure every time you wind him up. I can do this for hours, I tell ya. Hours. Well, till tomorrow, or maybe Monday, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters.
This week, we talk about how before we binged, we marathoned. When I recently recorded with Mothra Mystic and Shidrab Jira, they both talked about how a Sci-Fi Channel marathon in the early 2000s made them fans, or in Rob's case, reignited his fandom. It made me reflect on my own marathon experience. Mine was a little bit different than theirs. Mine centered around the TNT Monster Vision Godzilla Bash marathon in the early 90s, followed by the Mystery Science Theater 3000 Gamera marathons. It made me think, gee whiz, Slick, these marathons are kind of important. Maybe we should talk about them. So that's what we're going to do today. Let me take you back to the year 1994-ish, give or take. My local Blockbuster Video had Godzilla Returns and Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster on VHS to rent, and my local Toys R Us had a handful of movies like King Kong vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Megalon, and Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. And as I'm becoming a new fan at this point, and I am slowly trying to find whatever Godzilla movies I can get my hands on and wherever I can get them, here comes along TNT with the Monster Vision Marathon. And for context, at this point in the 90s, Joe Bob Briggs is not part of Monster Vision yet. This is just a banner that TNT would run marathons under. And they would do horror movies and monster movies and ultimately Godzilla movies. So the lineup for the TNT Monster Vision Godzilla Bash was a pretty sweet lineup. It had King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. the Thing, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, although there was one really infamous cut that I'll come back to later. Also had Godzilla's Revenge, and finally Terror of Mechagodzilla. And we can't forget the awesome Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla music video that TNT made that plays in between each of the movies. Sure, it's a little dubious in terms of some of the facts that it presents, and once again Baragon becomes the victim of mistaken identity, as now Gabra is erroneously called Baragon in this music video. Sorry, Baragon. I don't know why people keep using your name on other monsters, but, you know, I think you're cool. you'll get that squared away someday. But this is a pretty sweet lineup. And young me, who is just seeing these movies for the first time, I got to basically watch Godzilla's journey from villain to anti-hero to full-blown superhero all over the course of a day. And I was fortunate enough to have enough blank VHS tapes on hand to record this entire marathon. And these were my only copies of some of these movies for years. It was pretty hard to find copies of Terror of Mechagodzilla, Godzilla's Revenge, and Godzilla vs. the Thing when I was a kid. Even though it's the Raymond Burr version, Godzilla King of the Monsters is still pretty horrifying when you're a 10-year-old kid. And then you end the marathon with Terror of Mechagodzilla, which has one of the most explosive fights in the franchise. When I was a kid, I could not get enough of that final fight in Terror of Mechagodzilla. Just all the explosions and the crazy brawling and wrestling moves. I mean, the suit catches on fire at some point. I could not get enough of that as a 10-year-old. Plus, you have Godzilla vs. the Thing, which is just a classic and arguably one of the greatest Godzilla movies of all time, followed by one of the other greatest Godzilla movies of all time, in Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. But the TNT version has one pretty infamous cut. So, with the TNT broadcast of Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, they eliminate a whole bunch of the Planet X scenes, which means you don't get to see the Godzilla Rodan and King Ghidorah fight on Planet X. I had no idea this fight even happened for years, because this was like my only copy of many of these movies for quite a while. I was shocked to learn that TNT cut out not just a huge chunk of the story, but also a Godzilla fight scene. Come on, TNT. That's awful. Rounding out this marathon was Godzilla's Revenge, which is basically a glorified clip show with all the stock footage it has, so I really enjoyed it for all the varied monster fights that we got throughout the movie. But I did kind of hate Minya from the beginning. However, the scene where Gabara punches him in the face made me happy back then, and it still makes me happy to this day. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but you know what? I could watch that clip all day, on loop. But now we move over to the Mystery Science Theater 3000 side of things. I will pause really quick if you are not familiar with MST3K. It is my favorite show of all time. I think it was one of the funniest shows of all time, particularly the Comedy Central years. I will admit, I don't particularly care too much for the sci-fi years, but the Joel years, where he was the main host on Comedy Central, oh my, that stuff was flawless. So, quick synopsis, Mystery Science Theater 3000 is about Joel being shot into space by his evil bosses, and they force him to watch bad movies until his brain snaps. However, his workaround is that he builds some robot friends to watch these movies with him, and they riff through the movies to help get through it and help keep Joel's sanity. And Tom Servo and Crow T Robot are the two main robots that join Joel in these movies, and they were like the funniest things to me as a kid. Again, I don't know what that says about me as a person, but I'm gonna go with it. Anyway, MST3K, pretty famous for having marathons, particularly their Turkey Day marathons, but they would also do Gamera marathons from time to time. And this was my real first exposure to Gamera. They had riffed pretty much the entire Showa series except for Gamera Super Monster and Gamera vs. Varas. And I was able to tape this entire marathon as well. And again, these were kind of my only access to Gamera movies, because the only Gamera movie on VHS tape around me at the time was the very original. So I know Mystery Science Theater 3000 can be a little controversial in some circles, particularly horror circles, where they feel that they do a disservice to the movies. However, my view with Mystery Science Theater 3000 and the movies that he's done is that I always think it comes from an endearing place. And even as a kid, I never thought they were making fun of these movies. I thought they were making fun with these movies, we'll say. Now, I think the Gamera Showa movies have a lot of charm to them, and I think they're very entertaining. Even I have to admit that those kids can be annoying, and having Joel, Tom, and Crow riff over those kids really makes the movies much more entertaining, particularly when you get into stuff like the later Showa-era Gamera movies. Now, this is a tape that I was actually able to find recently of my full recording of the marathon, and I recently went back and I was rewatching some of these episodes that I recorded almost 30 years ago, which just made me really feel old as I said that. But the thing that really struck me, besides how well some of the jokes and riffs hold up to this day, is that Charles Barkley was in like every single commercial back then. And if Charles Barkley was in a commercial, you could guarantee it was either going to be for Mentos or for Zima. Oh, the 90s. Never change. Finally, we'll take a quick look at the Sci-Fi Channel marathons that Nikki and Shinrob Jira talked about. It's an interesting mix of Showa movies and 90s movies done under the banner Stompathon 2001. And on the Showa side, you had Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. And then it jumps to the 90s, where you get everything from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah up to Godzilla vs. Destroyer. That's a pretty neat mix, because that's a collection of movies that in general were just not shown too often on TV, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. The 90s movies, while they were becoming available on VHS tape at the time, just weren't readily available until the Sci-Fi Channel got a hold of them, and you also have to keep in mind that at this point in time, Godzilla was kind of faded from the pop culture consciousness. Well, we've gathered some anecdotal evidence through this podcast of at least 2 superfans that this marathon helped create, but it makes us wonder, how many more fans were created by these Sci-Fi Channel marathons? By the same token, how many fans were created by the TNT Monstervision Godzilla Bash marathons? On the MST3K side of things, I can say that made me a Gamera fan that still persists to this day. So there's some value to these marathons that are kind of a product of a yesteryear, as now we live in a day and age where you could download Pluto and basically have access to all the Godzilla and Gamera movies that once were rare treats to find on TV. And while I am nostalgic for these event viewing marathons of yesteryear, I do have to say, it is pretty sweet that we have pretty much everything we want to watch on demand whenever we want to watch it. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, because it's 2024, and Charles Barkley is still in nearly every other commercial on TV, and Zima made a comeback a few years ago. So I don't know, I guess time is a flat circle. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane as much as I have. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters.
Tiamat is finally popping up in stores regularly, and I was able to snag one recently, so let's take a look. First up, Tiamat's color scheme is very well done, and is a nice callback to a Charlotte Hornet starter jacket and those weird wax paper cups from the 90s. Tiamat is highly posable, having a multi-segmented body, head, arms, and legs that are all on ball joints. This allows Tiamat to wrap around figures and objects, but the figure is a bit top-heavy, so you'll have to be a little creative. Now, the detail is nicely done, and even the usually lackluster Playmates' eyes look okay here. I really like the detail in Tiamat's head with those long whiskers, which, I guess they're whiskers? I'm calling them whiskers. We're going with whiskers. I like that they're multicolored and fairly lengthy, and she comes with a bonus submarine. That's pretty cool. Normally, this is where I point out something ridiculous and chalk it up to Playmates gonna Playmates, but not this time. This is actually probably one of the best standard line figures Playmates has put out. So, good stuff. Keep up the good work, Playmates. So until next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Things weren't looking so hot for Super Rie Productions back in 1970, so to get things back on track, they created the delightful lunacy that is Ultrafight, a low-budget pro-wrestling-like show that ran for almost 200 episodes on the Tokyo Broadcasting Station. Wait a minute, wrestling on TBS? So that's where Ted Turner got the idea from. But I digress. The first 70 or so episodes are basically recycled stock footage from past shows. The real good stuff is what comes after. Pure, insane backyard wrestling using whatever suits and props Super Rie Productions had lying around, filmed in the most random locations, complete with play-by-play commentary. Now, all of your favorite match types are here: one-on-one matches, tag team contests, triple threat matches, and more. And honestly, there are no disqualifications because Ellie King brings a machine gun to his fights. And as a bonus, my dude Sibozu makes a handful of appearances and even notches a few wins. So that makes this an instant A+ in my book. With a little digging, you can find a number of episodes online, and it's definitely worth checking out a few. Enjoy. What better way to kick off the first Echo-ween than with a Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon? The Horror of Forgotten Island has some classic spooky season hallmarks, like opening with an intense storm at sea, leading to a mysterious uncharted island protected by a force field, containing a Cyclops that has hooves for feet and crab claws for hands. I don't know. But the greatest horror of all is here too, and that's Godzuki. Nah, actually, I'm just kidding. I actually don't mind Godzuki, and I think the hate he gets is unwarranted. I mean, he's 1,000 times cooler than Manila. But the star of the episode is this strange random Cyclops. But I kind of like his goofy design, and he's got a monstrous face that I think would be right at home in any Universal monster movie. Godzilla spends most of the episode grappling with the Cyclops while the crew tries to figure out how to get off the island. The Cyclops can turn invisible because, of course. So to counteract this, the crew decides to recreate the end of Carrie, and they douse him with red paint so Godzilla can body slam him and trap him once more behind the island's force field. Overall, it's a fun romp and a fine start to the Halloween season. For part 2 of Echo-ween, it's something totally different. Santo and Blue Demon vs. the Monsters sees Mexico's real-life lucha libre legends team up together to take on a mad scientist army that includes Frankenstein's monster, a mummy, a wolfman, vampires, ghouls, whatever the hell this is, and a Cyclops, which is actually a leftover suit from another production standing in for the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now this is less a movie and more of an 80-minute fever dream. The monsters are collected like Pokemon by the mad scientist and his evil clone of Blue Demon, with little to no explanation as to why they exist, and then the movie proceeds to be a bunch of fight scenes, broken up by the very occasional bit of dialogue, and a random musical number that goes on for, well, quite a while. But in true Santo movie fashion, you do get a few random wrestling matches sprinkled throughout, and if a movie has a few random wrestling matches sprinkled throughout, then it's an instant classic in my book. Now, is this fine art like the Plan 9 from outer space? No, not really. But does it pair well with the pumpkin spice substance of your choosing and make for an entertaining time? Of course. And if this is your first Santo movie, this is a good place to start. But be warned, if you dig deeper into the Santo catalog, you're opening a door to movie badness. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. The first Echoing comes to a close with a twist, as this time it's all about 1932's The Most Dangerous Game and its connections to 1933's King Kong. This pre-code RKO film, which is perhaps the earliest adaptation of the famous 1924 short story, shares quite a bit of cast and crew with Kong. The iconic Fay Wray is joined by her Kong co-stars James Flavin, Noble Johnson, and Carl Denham himself, Robert Armstrong, and the movie is produced by Ernest B. Shosdak and Marion C. Cooper, the King Kong directorial team. But the connections don't end there, intrepid listener, because according to legend, as part of The Most Dangerous Game's budget being sliced in half, the production would be filmed at night, at the same time and using the same jungle sets after filming for King Kong wrapped during the day. Now, is this true? Well, it's a little hard to say. Some sources claim that only Kong test footage was shot during filming, while other sources claim that Most Dangerous Game filmed during the day and Kong was actually filmed at night, so who really knows? But it does seem evident that sets were reused, most apparent by the appearance of the most famous log in film. Now, the movie itself isn't bad, however, I'm a bit partial to the Orson Welles radio adaptation that aired on Suspense in 1943. But that said, Armstrong hamming it up as the drunk brother and the big hunt at the end of the film are worth the price of admission alone, and that price is actually free on most streaming platforms these days. So why not make this a new addition to your Halloween viewing? Godzilla Fest 2024 is in the books, and it sure was a doozy. So let's do a quick recap, and this won't cover everything, just some of my personal favorite moments. The weekend started off strong with the announcement of a new Godzilla movie, once again helmed by Takashi Yamazaki. The internet rejoiced. Bandai is dropping a 5-piece Showa Movie Monster Series box set, with the big highlights being Gabara and Kamakuras. Plus, we're getting a giant condor figure because we're monsters. In a shocking, well, punch me in the face and call me Manila moment, Battleline announced the most random trio of new units ever: Showa Gamera, Showa Gauss, and Gigan Rex. Now, all the sprite work looks really good, and I totally admire the randomness of this whole event. Also, if the past holds true, at least one of these new units will be a meta-busting nightmare. And finally, we got the 5th Godzilla short that saw Godzilla and Jet Jaguar square off with King Ghidorah. Now, I won't spoil anything, but Toho does tend to pull these shorts down after a few days, so I suggest you hustle to their channel and watch it because it was awesome and had some fantastic over-the-top moments. And if you've already seen it, you know what I'm talking about. The suit work is really well done, and the atmosphere and how these shorts are filmed is fantastic. Plus, we'll be getting a Blu-ray collection next year of all the shorts. That's pretty neat. Well, with that said, happy birthday, Godzilla. Until next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Godzilla and Kaiju posters from Poland have long been a fun oddity for fans. The surreal and dreamlike images often seem far removed from the movies they represent, like the Son of Godzilla poster that depicts Manila's true form as a lumbering cosmic horror from hell, just like I always knew he was. But behind these fantastic posters is quite a history. Poland was a communist country post-World War II, and the government controlled virtually all areas of entertainment, including the film industry. But, for whatever reason, nobody seemed to care much about the film's posters. As such, movie posters were one of the few unregulated and relatively uncensored areas where Polish artists could express themselves freely through their art. As the artists didn't have to worry about having to sell the movie through their posters, they were free to create images that were abstract and explored themes related to the movies, often in a surreal and expressive style. This style became known as the Polish School of Posters, and no, there was no actual physical school. Now, I've always had a soft spot for these posters, particularly this poster for the original 1954 Godzilla movie, but there are countless posters from the late 1940s through the 1980s to explore, and they're all fascinating interpretive pieces of art hiding deep social and political history that we've only scratched the surface on here. So if you're interested in learning more about this topic, there's a lot of information out there and I highly recommend doing a deep dive yourself. Till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. Two things are always certain in life, and that's Mothra is going to die in a Godzilla movie, and Showa Godzilla movies are always going to experience some quirky name change when they come to the US. In 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is no different. When CinemaShares first brought the film to the US in 1976, they initially did it under the name Godzilla vs. the Bionic Monster because it's the 70s, and calling things Bionic was all the rage. So much so that Universal Pictures threatened legal action over the name being too similar to their own Bionic heroes, the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. CinemaShares decided they didn't want that Bionic beatdown and opted to change the name to Godzilla vs. the Cosmic Monster, but not before posters, TV ads, and print ads flooded the market. I even own a sheet of Bionic Monster ads that was meant for newspapers. Now, there is some dispute whether the movie ever played in the US with the Bionic Monster title, but if it did, it was probably at drive-ins in 1976. When I was a little kid in the 90s, though, the Cosmic Monster title was still prevalent. But when I learned that the movie was actually Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, I thought that sounded way cooler and I definitely wanted to seek that out. But maybe that's just me. Well, till next time, this has been Slick from Echoes of Giant Monsters. The holidays are here, and if you follow channels like this one, then you have no doubt received at least one, if not multiple texts from a friend or family member sending you image of the Godzilla Christmas tree from the year 2000, which is around the time Godzilla against Anguirus came out. Towering at a whopping 18 feet tall, the Godzilla tree was an attraction at Aqua City in Odaiba, Japan, and according to a late 2000 issue of G-Fan, 3 times a day Godzilla would blow radioactive Christmas smoke and roar as his theme played, because nothing spreads holiday cheer like simulated atomic breath. Now, as this is the day and age of free GeoCities websites, the internet had to get a few years older before the Godzilla Christmas Tree 1000 became a viral meme. But now, just as Santa can count on Rudolph to guide his sleigh, Godzilla fans can count on this image being sent to them at least once every December. Now, I often see social media posts bemoaning the return of this merry meme, but I don't mind it. It's just friends trying to share some holiday cheer with you over a common interest, and that's kind of what this season is kind of about. And plus, those Easter memes are just right around the corner. Well, till next time. Two of my favorite things have always been Godzilla and basketball, and in 1992, Nike smashed both of those things together when they launched the Godzilla vs. Charles Barkley marketing campaign. There was merchandise and ultimately a comic book, but today we're going to focus on the commercial. The famous Industrial Light and Magic brought this wild crossover to life with an awesome Godzilla suit that has an extremely expressive animatronic face, and to top things off, they even gave Godzilla a pair of goggles. I seriously want someone to make a figure of this Godzilla right away. Please. Now, ILM filmed the commercial using similar techniques as Toho does, with suitmation, hand-drawn atomic breath, and modified film speeds to give mass. They even put together a trailer to hype the upcoming commercial that contains a few alternate takes. Now, being a lifelong Celtics fan, and I don't want to hear your hate, I never appreciated Chuck trying to step to Godzilla, and I think Sir Charles knew he was outclassed, because he immediately throws this elbow that would still be a foul, even in the more physical 90s. If you did that today, that'd be a flagrant there, buddy. But at the end of the day, the two become friends, and in one version, Charles asks Godzilla if he ever thought about getting sneakers, and in another version, the Lakers and Elton Campbell get jabbed as Barkley says that they are looking for a big man. And with that, the two walk off into a Phoenix sunset. Okay, not really, but I had to drop one Phoenix Suns reference. Well, till next time.